Mm-hmm.
That may come, January, February, and then I have some staff, people that are going in there, and we need to, I don't know, go out, whatever we gotta do, get us some system up in there.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica Humphrey. I'm the CoC coordinator at Metro. Let's just give everyone maybe another minute or so to come in, and we'll get started on today's conversation.
I hate when they take over your screen. All right, there it is.
Alrighty. So good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Erica. I'm the CoC coordinator. Thank you for taking time out of your day to attend the second community conversation. Yesterday we had our first one. It was about the soon to be ending SARA program. We had a lot of really good conversation yesterday. And so I am hoping that today's conversation will be just as helpful. We're going to have Travis and Misty discussing the VI-SPDAT, kind of a refresher training for those of us who use the VI-SPDAT. It's an extremely important assessment tool. As we all know, it really helps our people get the housing that they need. It's extremely important to make sure that that is filled out correctly and that it's filled out consistently. And then Charmaine will be talking about the VI-SPDAT turnaround. Make sure that your microphones are on mute so that we don't get any feedback or background noises while the presenters are presenting. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our presenters.
Travis, do you want to go first or you want me to?
I can go first. My part of the presentation is basically we're going to talk about the CESA, and we're going to talk about how the CESA is a serious tool that will be used for finding out the history of the individual, where they are. A lot of agencies are not HMIS. They don't have HMIS access, and then we don't have a sharing agreement between all of our agencies when in HMIS. So there may be data that one agency has that you can't see. The CESA is a very serious tool because it really gauges where the client has been. It gauges, gets their personal information, email address, phone number, how many nights they've been homeless in that situation. I don't know if we have a copy of the CESA that can be put up, but if done accurately, you can really get a serious, firm picture of their history and how they became homeless and what can be utilized to what services would best utilize the client. You need to kind of engage them in the CESA. On the back of the CESA, it asks also what agencies they would not like to share their information with. I'm not sure in this community if we're not asking that question, but we really need to engage our clients to see maybe they may have had a bad experience. We don't want them to ever clam up and feel like they don't want to talk, or they're going to run into an issue. We're trying to close this this narrow approach, and we're doing a no wrong door approach. So I would hope that everyone in the community would adopt utilizing the CESA. Once it's completed, along with the other assessments, it can be sent over with the VI-SPDAT or with all the other assessments and the information. Thank you, DeAndre. It can be sent over to CESA@metroflint.org. This is the document that we're talking about. If you scroll on the side, it says current living situation. Let's stop right here. One of the biggest issues we're seeing is the no income. Go up a little bit, DeAndre, if you don't mind. The income, we need to know what their income is. We need to know if they have income, if they have insurance, if they're pregnant. Those things are very, very helpful. And if you can get them to talk on the CESA, by the time they get to the VI-SPDAT, they will share more information. We can go down a little bit. Their current living situation, if they're not in a shelter or anywhere, they're being met with outreach. Let's try to get clear knowledge of where they come from so that we can track their history and we can really have an understanding of how they became homeless, where they've been in the transition of homelessness, so that by the time they are housed, we have a clear history of how the system and how those in the community have assisted these clients with getting back on their feet and gaining their independence. Let's go down some. The real issue that I'm seeing is the approximate date homelessness started. They may say, well, I don't know the date. You start talking seasons. Was it wintertime? Was it near Christmas? Was it after a holiday? Get us as close as possible so that we'll have an understanding. Go down a little bit more. And I just have a couple more things I'm just gonna hit on. Disability. They may not know what a disability is. They may say, well, I don't have a disability, but I'm in mental health. Mental health is considered a disability. So begin to ask them, are you in mental health? Have you ever had mental health treatment? Or they've not gone to a doctor or had anyone talk to them in the last however many years? If they're homeless, I'm gonna say this. If they're homeless, they're in survival mode. If anybody's ever been homeless, you enter into something called survival mode. So in survival mode, you're going to protect the one thing that you have control over. And what's that? Information. You're going to protect the information that's most important. So when doing these assessments, when doing the CESA, they need to feel that you care and that you are trying to help them. This should not just be a question and answer thing. You should let them talk. If you let them talk, they will tell you a lot of information that you can fill out on this form. Keep that form of transparency. Let them know that you're here to help and you're not here to just document, especially if you're dealing with a mother with children, because women with children, for some reason, there's a stigma out there that if they go to a shelter, that CPS will be called. If they go get help with their DV, CPS will get called. This is the thing that they're thinking. And we're run across these cases more and more. So they keep their mouths shut and they don't say anything. And that information is very, very vital to them getting a great score. It is very vital to them knowing who we can put them in touch with. There are services at the YWCA that they can access, even if they're in a shelter, that would help them. But we have to know this stuff. So we have to be warm. And if you're going to refer them to another agency, or if you're going to give them to another agency, let's do the warm handoff approach. Let you contact somebody and you talk to the representative, and then you give them the representative's information that they may reach out to the representative, instead of them just walking and saying, hey, I was sent by Cindy Lou to come over here. And I don't know who Cindy Lou is. Where was you at? You know, we need to do better at handing clients off to other agencies. We need to do better in our referral system so the client feels like that they're being heard, they're being understood. And let me say this, even if the client's story is bunk and bogus, they need to understand that we have a heart to care. I'm not saying that nobody is 100% a villain or nobody is 100% a saint. We've all had our screw ups, our mess ups, and our miscalculations. But from this point on, I'm saying let's as a community work to do what's best in the interest of the client when it comes to knowing where to refer them. Let's not give a I don't know answer right off the bat. Let's give a let me see what I can find, or let me see what I can research, or let me see what we can do. Let me call you back. Let me make some calls. That's a whole lot better than a flat no. And then they go 2 resources over and they get a yes somewhere else. And it feels like, well, the last person didn't care, because what happens is after they get passed off a couple of times, they tend to put everybody in a lump. And this CESA form is very, very important because it can be passed, it can be copied from agency to agency that are on the back and are agreed to, that the agency can get a firm look of who they're dealing with. This list of clients, we can pass them off to everyone in the community, and you will know where they've been, what agencies they've talked to, how they've been impacted, how to handle their case so that they can best be helped. I see there's a 3rd page. Go down a little bit more, DeAndre, or is that just the end of that page? All right, so this is if they are more than just, it can be the first page can be a husband and wife, or a husband and a first child. I've seen some agencies fill out the front CESA form and just fill it out several times. No, there's another page for you to add the additional household members. Also, take the time to get those additional household members conditions. Take the time to understand their preferred pronouns, understand their gender, understand their race. Despite what you think or what you feel, that goes out the window when you're doing these assessments. It needs to allow them to have a venting session about their homelessness so that we can get all the data we can so that we can help them. I'm done with my part. We'll pass this on to Misty.
I'm just going to go over the SPDAT, some things that have been brought to my attention over the years of doing the SPDAT, because I've noticed some of them come back, like when we get the referrals to our housing programs, some of them sometimes might have a 1, a 2, a 3, and that's a really low score. We're not trying to score them out of services. We're definitely not trying to make it something that it's not. I instruct myself, and I instruct our staff that when they start a SPDAT, especially because I still work with street outreach, and then having 6 housing programs here and a 7th one coming in, I make it clear before I even start doing that this is strictly just for housing purposes. We're not turning this in to CPS or MDHHS. We are trying to prioritize and see what other housing programs they could possibly qualify for. So especially when I'm working with street outreach and you have a mom and her kids, they're staying off and on from house to house, or in their car, or in abandoned, they're looking at me like, especially first encounter, because sometimes you have to get them when you can, whether it was designed to be done on the first encounter or not. But you're completing that paperwork and you want them to be, you haven't established like a full relationship with them as you would if you were in the shelter. So in doing that, I make it clear to them that unless I legitimately see abuse or neglect, yes, I have to report that because I'm a social worker. But my intent is not to create more barriers, but to help them with their process and eliminate some barriers. and get them into, stable housing of their own. So when I start that, looking on the singles form, where do you sleep most often? A lot of times I notice people just mark shelters or outdoors, or something. They don't really think about it. They just assume that they know where they sleep most often because they might be in the shelter that day. But typically, maybe that was a last resort for them. Maybe they are used to sleeping outside under a bridge or a parking garage, because I know there's a couple, well, not a lot, but a few of the people that we've worked with regularly where they do. And then also, how long has it been since you've had permanent stable housing? A lot of times that they misunderstand that question, and they'll say, well, I was staying with my brother for 2 years and then we got into it and they told me I had to go. But that might not have been stable. That could have been them, in and out between the shelter, between brothers, between other family members. So it really means stable housing. Some other things that one of the guys I work with Street Outreach had stressed to me on part B with risks, on section D, where it says use a crisis service, including sexual assault and crisis. That's like a 5-6 part question there, and it does it a couple times throughout the SPDAT. But when you are asking these questions, because they can be invasive to a male, all of that, or even 2 or 3 of those things might be a yes. But the minute that you say something about sexual assault, the answer is going to be no. We're not going to get accurate information. So maybe think about what information they're giving to you, because they will always give you, most times, more information than what you require for that particular question. So they might say no to something that you asked, but then you asked something similar further down and they gave you extra information, and you go back and realize that that question really should have been a yes. So just really paying attention to the information that they give you. Because it will change the score. Like they have a story to tell. And it's not too often where where they give me minimal information. Sometimes they just start talking, and I ask the questions, but I already know the answer before I ask the question because of all the information that they've already given me. But just if you're really explaining to them at the beginning of your intake that this is, based on a point system, and you need them to be honest with you, because the stigma has always been, don't give more information than what they ask for, or you may not get the assistance you need. This is the one time that we really need them to be honest with us, so we know what barriers they have and what all they may qualify for. We know where to refer them to, what helps the QB&L and coordinated entry and the HARA be able to assess whatever resources may be available to them. It might be something that Tracy and her team knows about that I don't know about, a loophole. There's been stuff where I've done intakes and their team didn't know about a certain loophole, especially when you come to youth and homelessness, or people that are in a rehabilitation facility or in a place such as Odyssey or New Path. If they were homeless going in and they went into treatment for less than so many days, and I had to check on the amount of days because I don't know if it's changed recently, but if they were homeless prior to going into getting treatment and they come out and they have to exit within 30 days and have no place to go, they will be able to still keep their homeless status. So we could start their process while they're still in there that last 30 days if the case manager can give us a letter and verify that they in fact have nowhere to go upon exiting, and we can start calling the shelter to get them on that wait list to get them in. So getting the information and explaining that stuff in the beginning is really crucial to making sure that you're getting accurate information on the whole SPDAT. On the part where it talks about.
Excuse me, Misty, can I interrupt for just a moment?
Go ahead.
Okay, let's go back up to risks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what I'm seeing on a lot of CESAs, a lot of VI-SPDATs, is people will say yes. That's asking for numbers. It says in the past 6 months, how many times? I did a VI-SPDAT, I put it in the system, and I noticed that one VI-SPDAT had yes twice, and because it just had yes twice, they didn't get a point. So when the client was called back and asked, how many times were you in the hospital? They was like, I was in the hospital 3 times. And how many times do you use an ambulance? I used the ambulance all 3 times. Well, if you look at the scoring up under there, it says if the total number of interactions equals 4 or more. Now we can say that it's 4 per thing, or we can say altogether is a cumulative of 4. But when you put them in the system, when you put them in HMIS, they're going to add all of that up. And that's when they're going to say, okay, you've had 6 interactions in this risk category. So here's your point. And that's how a lot of clients are losing points, because, not trying to be funny when I say this, but reading is fundamental. You need, as a doer of the VI-SPDAT, to comprehend the scoring before you ask the questions. Because if you don't comprehend the scoring before you answer the questions, you are going to lower their score. Not they lowered their score, you are going to lower their score. And if after you get through doing all of this, you're only checking to see certain stuff, like listen to them. If they say they've been in an abusive situation, or they say they got in a fight before they came to the shelter, and you get to the question, have you been beaten? Have you been attacked or beaten since you've become homeless? And they say no, remind them of the occasion when they were talking earlier about being in the altercation, so they can get the point. A lot of us are not saying anything because we think, okay, well, I'm gonna let them talk and I can't interject. Interject so that they can get the point. Because by the time we get these VI-SPDATs and there are 6, and we call these clients over again, and they just were done 2 weeks before we got them, there are 12. And that's not acceptable, because on our part of a community, we didn't read. That's all I want to say. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. No, you explained that well. So, no, you're absolutely right on that part. And then going down, since he covered 5 for me, on 6, have you threatened to or tried to harm yourself or anyone else in the last year? They automatically say no, because they don't want to be viewed as somebody that is violent or out here doing something that's malicious. It could have just been something in the shelter where somebody was harassing them or giving them a hard time, which happens often, especially when they're standing outside smoking, talking amongst each other, where they made a threat to somebody and, leave me alone. Like, so again, just listening to the information that they give. And then also on number 7, where it says, do you have any legal stuff going on right now that may result in you being locked up or having to pay fines, make it more difficult for you to find a place to live? Really listening to the information that they give. A lot of times it's marked no by the time we get it, but then when one of the case managers is meeting with them, we find out that they really do have stuff going on, but they felt if they said yes, then they're going to get refused service, or they're not going to qualify for something. So just the explanation and how you explain the beginning, at the very beginning of doing this, is really crucial to getting accurate answers. Number 8, I think, goes to speak for itself. Does anybody force you or trick you to do things you do not want to do? So even if it's something as simple as their bridge card, and give me this, give me $50 and I'll give you $20. They don't want to, because they know they're going to need it. They don't know where they may be next week, or if they'll be in the shelter or staying place to place, but they really need that cash at that time. Maybe it's to put cell phone minutes on, minutes on their cell phone. But nonetheless, it doesn't have to be something that's necessarily harmful or bad. But again, paying attention to the information that they give you. A lot of times it's marked no, and we find out it's really yes. On number 9, again, being careful how you ask that, especially when it comes to, the females. We don't want to cause further trauma, but, we need to know, are these some of the barriers and things that you're experiencing? Same thing with the males. You might not want to put the part in there about, do you ever do things that may be considered to be risky, like exchange sex for money, run drugs for someone, have unprotected sex with someone you don't know, share a needle, or anything like that. It's just, there's several parts to that question there. So just paying attention to all of it. Go ahead.
And Ms. D, if I could go back to point 7, a lot of times when we get the VI-SPDAT and later in the process, we learn that they have an eviction. Mm-hmm. An eviction, this is a good place where you can mark yes there. because it will make it difficult, if not impossible, for them to rent a place. I just wanted to bring that out for question 7.
Yeah, can I
I
add to that?
also associate that with question 10, where it says, is there any person, past landlord, business, bookie, dealer, or government group like the IRS that thinks you owe them money? I include water, student loans, anything that may take your money that you cannot, it's going to make it harder for you to get into housing. So I associate 7 and 10 to be similar, just 7 is more like criminal related or, legal stuff that way.
Misty,
Yeah.
I think that in number 7, and I know you have to say it the way it's written, but the whole thing with right now, I think makes people think that it's something that's happening. And like the biggest thing that like Emily and I have talked about is people with CSC convictions. That is the biggest thing that's going to make it difficult to find a place to live, and that is legal. But people don't think that's going on right now. They would like to think that that was way in the past. So I
word it differently. When I asked it, I don't use the exact wording that's on there like that to cover those types of things, because it will make it difficult for them to find a place to live. You're absolutely right on that. I don't read it word for word, because even on another question where it's asked something in the beginning about, have you been attacked or beaten up since you became homeless? And I always change it to experiencing homelessness, because it's a situation. It doesn't define who they are. I change a lot of the verbiage on these questions.
I wondered about that with the getting beat up. If you got beat up and that's why you're homeless, do you include that? Because it's not since you became homeless, but it seems like it should
contributed. If it contributed, I mean,
okay,
and
so
it's just listening to that information that they're giving you, because they'll tell you the story. They're always, I can say 9 times out of 10, they're giving me more information, because I simply explained at the beginning of the intake that this is based on a point system and it can determine what you may or may not qualify for. I don't want you to fabricate any information, but this is the one time I absolutely need you to be honest with me.
And let me say, go ahead. I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
Well, that's okay. I just wanted to follow up on what Tracy and Jody were saying, because I've talked to both of them about that before as well on 7, and maybe even you, Misty, too. I agree with the way it's worded. If you read it as it's written, then it seems like right now, do you have a warrant out for you right now? Are the police looking for you? That kind of thing. But it's so important about the evictions or the past criminal record. Almost, do we want to add that as a note and in this, or right over the top of the question side by it, or something to indicate what it is exactly? Yes to that part.
I agree with you, Emily. I think just making sure that we talk about it as a community the way that we are now, because there's 39 people, there was 40 something on this call, and between the shelters and all of us, that we're all on the same page. I don't know, this is something that can be edited because they are moving away from using it, but we're still using it in our community for right now because we haven't adopted anything else. But 7 and 10 are very similar. And yes, I agree with you and Tracy both on that. We see it from different aspects because they see it as, from coordinated entry standpoint. I see it from shelter, street outreach, and HARA programs. And then of course your street outreach also. So it's definitely the way that you word it. But just being mindful that the people we work with and our community partners know that as well.
Misty says something that I want to go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Travis.
Misty says something that I think we fail to get. This document is trying to get a lot of information in a few questions. So let's look at number 7. Do you have any legal stuff going on right now? One question. Do you have any legal stuff going on right now that may result in you being locked up? One question. Do you have any legal stuff right now that will have you pay fines? One question. Or do you have any legal stuff right now that going on right now that will make it more difficult for you to rent a place to live? Sometimes you're going to have to break this down, because if you got tickets and you owe $3 grand in tickets and you're on SSI with an $800 income and you're going to pay these tickets because there is a bench warrant out for you, and you don't want this bitch. I don't know how they get $3,000 in tickets, but have seen it happen. And you're saying, okay, if you don't pay these fines, will this warrant come back and will they try to lock you up for these tickets? The answer is yes.
And also, Travis, I'm so glad that you said that, because on number 7, if they say yes, we should automatically be referring them to homeless court.
Exactly.
That can help with that. We have judges and lawyers that are working with our homeless court. If you're not familiar with it or need more information, Kelly Beidelman is absolutely wonderful. She will send you the links for the forms and all the information on it. We meet bi-monthly, but that person could be a referral to that program. You have to do a program letter and state why they need to, you know, the assistance, and that they're currently experiencing homelessness, and give some background information on them. And there's forms for it. But if 7 is yes, they should be referred to our homeless court.
And I'm gonna say this as well. If they're on probation, that is not free. They have to pay for probation.
Definitely.
If they're not working, we need to figure out where their probationary status is and how it's going and what's the. I'm just saying all this because when you've been a case manager in a shelter before, all of this stuff will come up. They'll get a voucher. There'll be moments from being housed and somebody will walk through the door with a folded piece of paper and ask for them. And then everything that they have is gone. And if you hadn't known this, the 2 months, the 3 months that they sat in that shelter, you could have worked to prevent it or put them in touch with people who could have prevented it. And because they didn't interpret it. It's about interpretation. They didn't interpret this question the way it can be broken up to help them get a higher score, to help them be placed in resources.
Hey, this is Deborah. Can I just interject a thought in here? So I'm listening to the presentation and all of this is good, but I think we should keep in mind that yes, we can ask a million questions, but a person is going to reveal what they want to reveal. And that's what this VI-SPDAT is, a self-reporting tool. And we can pry, and we can sometimes pry too much and break a person down, and then what's the use in that? So I'm just saying that I just would like to use the tool for what it's supposed to be used. I agree that digging deep, but I think there's a place for that. This, like, again, this tool is designed for self-reporting.
And we agree with that, Deborah. It is used for self-reporting. And I understand about the prying and the case management, but all of that works hand in hand, and we can't help them. If they score a 13 and we don't know what barriers they have, we won't help them. That's why we're talking along the lines that we are, because we have people who are eligible for housing and they get awarded and then we can't find them, or they're not in the place to accept the housing because they have even more barriers before them. So that's why this conversation is, that's why this conversation is along those lines. But yes, you are right.
No, then this is all really good conversations. I mean, everybody's added something great. So thank you, because we all do it from different perspectives and different levels where we implement and ask these. But again, I can say 9 times out of 10, if I explain what the SPDAT does and why I'm asking these questions and letting them know up front, it's a little bit invasive, but strictly used for housing purposes and for us to be able to assist you, because again, they reached out to us in some fashion, whether it's street outreach, whether it's Shelter of Flint, whether it's GHS, whether it's Metro, whether it's HARA, no matter what it is, in some capacity, they reached out to us. So they're seeking services. But even if it's sometimes a little bit difficult and you let them know what it's for, I can guarantee 9 times out of 10 out of any of these that I've ever done, and I've done a lot of them, they're going to give me the information that I want. It's not a fight. They might ask me a lot of questions at times where they want, well, why are you asking this? Or why are you asking that? And I take the time to explain it, no matter how much frustrating it is. I might have 5 people after them, but explaining that at the beginning has helped our processes tremendously. Just letting them know what the purpose of asking the questions is. And you know, it's a point system, it's a survey, it's invasive, but here, this is, again, these are the things that's going to help me help you. So if you want to improve your situation, I need you to be honest with me. And then going down, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Misty. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to say from my end with the clients that I'm working with, a lot of times these questions are hard for them to listen to and be patient to answer and understand what I'm asking. So we'll spend a long time and I do what you are suggesting and explain, this is only to help you and this is only, there's no judgment here. These are just questions that are going to help you in the long run. But I find a lot of times that I've built a relationship or known of someone for several months, let's say, or even just a shorter time, and I'm at the point of filling this out, and I have witnessed hurting someone else or threatening someone else with my own eyes from this client, or selling their food stamp card so they can get some money, or know that they have evictions or a criminal background. However, they're not going to answer these correctly. But I feel that that's a disservice to them to not answer them from what I know to be the honest truth when I've been involved with them.
Mhm.
I agree with you. And something that I know, because the last thing I want to do by asking some of these questions is cause them more trauma or, bring up things that is difficult for them to talk about. But I try to be positive, and like where Bill mentioned in the chat about motivational interviewing and case management, but just being positive in the aspect that you're taking this step, you took this step to get to this point and make your situation better. So adding like that positive piece to it, like it may be difficult, but look at, you're doing it, like you're moving yourself forward. And that's helped as well. I don't have all the answers. I just know what works for us in our case, myself and our case managers. And then of course, being with Street Outreach, I've been in this for, 9 years. And most of our programs here require VI-SPDAT. HCD does not. However, we still utilize it and it's helpful to the stuff that Lisa does. So just trying to make sure that we continue to have these conversations amongst each other and the case managers as we do the warm transfers, as Travis suggested. All of those things, we won't never have all the answers, but just making sure we're mindful as we're doing this part of it, as long as we're still utilizing this tool. But going down to section C, where it says, is there any person, past landlord, business, bookie dealer, or government group like the IRS that thinks you owe them money? I'm like student loans, consumers energy, water bill, anything that's going to take your money to make it harder for you to get into a place or maintain your portion of the rent. It doesn't have to just be the things that are listed. Student loans, or do they have an old bill where their wages may get garnished? Anything that's going to prevent them or take from their money to be in stable housing. So that's where Tracy mentioned the stuff about in Travis about probation fees or anything like that, whatever is going to make it more difficult. And then again, do you get money on question 11 from the government, a pension, inheritance, working under the table, regular job, or anything like that? It could be, I've seen women braid hair when they're in the shelter, do the other woman's hair, or where it's, they do haircuts and things like that, or somebody does their nails, give me a couple of cigarettes and I'll paint your nails for you. Just different things. So anything that gets them some sort of money, because when they're doing their Section 8 paperwork with Becca Management, there is a zero income form that asks, do you collect cans? How do you get money? How do you pay for this? How do you pay to do your laundry? Well, I get stuff, from Crossover. I get laundry soap from, Catholic Charity Center for Hope. They ask those things on that. And it's a 3-page questionnaire. So again, how do they get money? Question 12, do you have planned activities other than just surviving that make you feel happy and fulfilled? They'd be like, yeah, okay, what is it? And they can't give me anything. So they're just, again, in straight survival mode. They're just making sure that they eat, that they shower, they can wash their clothes from day to day to day. Everything else is, last on their agenda. And then on 13, are you currently able to take care of your basic needs like bathing, changing clothes, using a restroom, getting food, clean water? And they say, yeah. Well, it may not be, it might be yeah for today, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be tomorrow if they're not in the shelter and they're staying in an abandoned home or their car. is grandma going to be in a good mood today that she allows me to come in the house and take a shower? That may not be every day. And there's several questions there. When the pandemic was in full force and everything first shut down, I remember walking along the river on street, doing street outreach work, and there was a gentleman, because he used to go to the city of Flint and wash up all the time in the businesses downtown. Well, all those buildings closed. I seen him bent over in the river washing up. He had his shampoo and his soap there and everything else. So being mindful of those things, it might be yes for today, but it doesn't mean it's going to be yesterday or tomorrow.
Hey, Misty.
Misty.
I think on the full SPDAT, that question actually specifically states, can you take care of it without relying on someone else? So it's not whether you're able to do it, it's whether you have the ability to do it without relying on some other services like the shelter. You always get the top score in that if you're in the shelter, because you count on the shelter to let you bathe.
Yeah, Misty, I was going to add to that I think that you can read that two ways. Are you physically capable of like taking care of your basic needs, like bathing and changing your clothes and using a restroom, as far as you're not in a wheelchair or you're not disabled physically? But I read this, or I want the clients to answer this based on, I'm living in an abandoned house with no water, and unless outreach brings me food or I'm able to get lunch at the soup kitchen, I can't take care of these things. I don't have anywhere to take a shower. And they always answer yes, because I think they think it means, are you physically capable?
Right. Nope, you're
Yep.
right.
Somehow and then that leads to a discussion of, but really, are you, so-and-so, are you able to get cleaned up today? Do you know where you're going to have dinner for sure, unless it means that I'm bringing it out to you? I just don't like that question. I think it gets missed. I think it gets messed up because of the way it's worded.
Yeah, I agree with Emily. I think anybody that's homeless should say no to that. They can't because they count on other people.
Exactly. Yes.
I agree with you guys, both of you completely. And that's again why I'm reading it to the way that it's written, to bring it up so that we're talking about these things, to be mindful of it, because though we may know it, somebody else on the call may not, or they may have a discussion with one of their coworkers and a coworker has like that light bulb that goes off in their head. I don't word these, hardly any of them, the way that they're written, because I have done it long enough to know this, but other people haven't.
So Misty, let me ask you then, from your end of things and for housing's end, if that question is answered no, is that looked at then as like a physical disability problem for housing, or are we going to take that into consideration that that's no because of homelessness?
I consider it to be no because of their experience with homelessness, because there's physical disability questions on the other page.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
Because this is under socialization and daily functioning. So I'm making sure that we read those categories, like what it falls under. Is really being mindful and knowing the questions. And like somebody mentioned in the chat, role playing or whatever with your staff. I've done that with my staff. I've done it with street outreach where I've had interns question me on things and where I've been really difficult to show them how it can be. So no, I don't socialize it with that. But you're accurate.
This is great feedback. This is how we're able to learn from the experts and those with the experience to help us frame the question differently or add a different perspective to the question. So this is why I love this venue. And I'm glad that those who have experience and you bring your different perspective can help all of us better answer or position the question so that we can get the right answer. And our next VI-SPDAT training will be role play. Lori brought that up. I think that's excellent. Missy just mentioned it. So our next one, either in 1 month or 6 weeks, we'll talk about that with the team. It will be all role play. But great dialogue. Go ahead, Missy.
So going down to 14 is your current experience with homelessness in any way caused by a relationship that broke down, unhealthy or abusive relationship, or because family or friends caused you to become evicted, is almost very similar to question number 27 on the last page, where it says, has your current period of homelessness been caused by an experience of emotional, physical, psychological, sexual, or any other type of abuse or trauma you experienced? They're very similar. If they say one be yes, the other one should almost automatically be yes, because they go hand in hand. So just being mindful of those things. And again, it's a 5-6 part question. So thinking of the person and the information that they've already given to you, and how you may word that. Again, with 27, Hussein always reminded me, Misty, don't say that, the sexual part with a male. Or, the rest of it could be yes, but because of that part, he's almost going to tell you no every time. I think I can count maybe 3 times where I slipped after he made me aware of that part, and I actually said it and a male answered yes to me still. But any other time, if I answer it, ask the question again, like just to see, because I've done that where I added it like it was another question, then my answer was, different. So making sure that you're paying attention to the information that they give you, because if you're answering yes to 14, it's almost positive when you get to that part, you already know the answer. I mean, you still ask the question, but being mindful of how you answer it and the information that they give you.
Misty, can I interject? Oh, go ahead. Whoever, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was me. I was just going to say that no matter how many times you tell a dude that you're asking them if they've been a victim of DV, I've had so many dudes try to tell me no, they would never hit a girl. And
right.
I think that's something that dudes just assume you're asking them if they have abused someone. Yeah, it's really hard to convince them that that's not what you want to know. Oh,
right. And that's why I said, for all these things that you guys are bringing up, I don't ask the questions the way that they're written at all for that specific reason. So I'm really just hopeful that it helps everybody else, because I mean, I've done trainings before for staff internally for both agencies, and it's helped so much. So thank you for bringing that up, because you're right. That victim part seems to get skipped, especially with the male population, because it's something we don't talk about. We think it's just, females are the victims. On the next page where it says D for wellness, this goes to, physical health, drinking and drug use, mental health, those things. So being mindful, because this section, I think I find the hardest for clients to give me answers, accurate answers. But again, I pay attention to what they say to the other questions and leading up to this with the information that they've given me. And I think, Emily, you would have some really good background on section D. So if you want to jump in, please do so, because with the population that you work with, as well as GHS, have you ever had to leave an apartment, shelter, program, or place you were staying because of your physical health? It says physical, however, it could have been something that their mental cognitive issues, even though it asks in different questions at the bottom and other parts of this page, being mindful of the answers that they give you, because they may say no, but in all reality, it was usually yes. So I left Carriage Town because of, whatever their answer may be, but I left Carriage Town to go to Shelter of Flint because they go back and forth, they go between shelters. Or the elevator at Shelter of Flint didn't work, so I went to Carriage Town. Maybe they were in a walker and, it couldn't be fixed right away. I've seen that happen. On 17, if there was space available in a program that specifically assisted people that live with HIV or AIDS, would that be of interest to you? That question is always tricky on how clients respond to me. I don't have a correct answer on that one. I did my internship at Wellness, but that's a 50-50. However I ask it, if I'm going to get an accurate answer, because then they think that they're going to be judged for it. And then 18, do you have any physical disabilities that would limit the type of housing you could access or make it hard to live independently because you need help? It could be that their knees or their hip and going up and down the stairs. I get that a lot. No, I can do it because they want to get in housing. So again, just being mindful of the things that they give you. And then 19, I'll get no quite often. When you are sick or not feeling well, do you avoid getting help? Maybe mom don't want to miss work and she's staying in her car temporarily off and on until she can get into the shelter or the warming center or wherever it is that she's trying to get into. So she avoids going to the doctor. It happens often. Me as a case manager and somebody that's working, I do it when I'm too busy, where we neglect to take care of ourselves because we're working or taking care of kids or don't have a sitter. So just being mindful of those things. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. And sometimes when you ask those questions in that section, they take it as a negative or that it's going to be held against them, but they just really ultimately want to get into housing, so they don't answer accurately, thinking it's going to be held against them. Same thing with 21 and 22. Has drinking or drug use led you to be kicked out of an apartment or program or place you were staying in the past? Warming center, a good portion of them were asked to leave or not, because they were intoxicated, and clearly intoxicated, and where they weren't able to, that they were disturbing other people. So just being careful how you ask that question. I know shelters sometimes when it's 4th of July weekend or Memorial, they will test them for alcohol when they come back in. So those type of things, being mindful of those things. Emily,
excuse me 1 second, Miss Misty. For 16, I just want to say where it says chronic health issues with lungs, bronchitis and asthma is you can mark yes for that. And a lot of them don't think because they have bronchitis or asthma that is something that's chronic. And I've had that with someone before, so I was just want to bring that to light.
You're right. And also with COVID too, we've had a lot of clients where they have ongoing issues after having COVID with their lungs and things. So no, you're right on that. And then again, down at 23, have you ever had trouble maintaining your housing or been kicked out of an apartment, shelter, or program place you were staying because of a mental health issue or concern, a past head injury, a learning disability, developmental disability, or other impairment, again, cognitive? Do you have any mental health or brain issues that would make it hard for you to live independently because you need help? That's usually a harder section for clients to answer, and you have to get more information in some capacity. And I'm sure Emily can speak on this as well.
I was going to say, and Bill just wrote it in the chat, I don't think that we should be combining necessarily the substance abuse and the mental health. Yes, they can be co-occurring. However, this section here is my biggest one with PATH clients, and especially 24, because they will say no to me, and however, I will believe that their mental health does require that they're going to need some help to live. It's just, first of all, there's all the denial of that the mental health issue is why they were kicked out of MBK or why they were taken out of Carriagetown or why they were kicked out of the warming center. And they don't want to answer that correctly, but I want to answer it correctly for them because I know that that was the truth. So that's a struggle. And then if we have to talk about it, a lot of times there's just some anger and more denial. So that's a conflict for me when I'm filling these out, depending on who I'm dealing with. But
Emily, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was going to say, you guys, my degree is in business, but you guys are social workers. If you know that this person has a mental impairment or needs mental, you should answer yes, because if they are paranoid, or most people who have mental issues are not going to say, yes, I do suffer. Some do. But as a practitioner with a degree in social work, there should be some degree where you can mark yes. And that's a conversation we can have at another time. but I think your degrees allow you to make that assumption.
No, that's great. Thanks, Tracy. I agree because I can see it with my own eyes and then watch it happen and be called and told about it from another professional, but yet the client will, well, that wasn't my fault. That so and so did that to me and it had nothing to do with my mental health, when that's just totally not true.
You're spot on, and you and I work together often on these, or you're giving me updates on the people that we work with. But I think it's also important when we're doing the CESA in the note part, if we need to put something about this client is, has some big concerns. So maybe when we're referring them out to PSH or rapid rehousing, just to highlight that on the CESA if need be, that this person is a domestic violence survivor now that the Y has, rapid rehousing funds, or if it's somebody that should be referred to GHS to better assist them versus Catholic Charities or MBK. I think because this section is the hardest section because of how it all runs together with mental health, physical, and substance use. This is my hardest section to do. So I think highlighting that when we're doing our paperwork, if we need to, just so that when they're sending the referrals out, they're like, oh yeah, this person had, it was mentioned that this person probably should be, because we want to give them the best service possible. And where GHS could probably assist them better than I could, or somebody on our team could. And the section will help highlight it. Yeah.
Okay, Misty, you guys, Travis, all of the participants, you have helped us, the community, better position. But we have 35 minutes left. And Charmaine, and that whole discussion around the turnaround, is this a good time to pause?
No, because we're done with this section anyways. There's only 3 left, and I've already covered 27.
Okay.
There's 2 left. So,
but I did see Langston had her hand up.
Okay.
And then I'll give it back to you, Miss.
It wasn't important. I was just going to say how I also break down that first question about have you ever had trouble maintaining your housing? And then I stopped there and paused because possibly of a mental health issue or low grade depression. Sometimes people get kicked out because folks say you're lazy, you don't do anything. All you do is lay around. What it could be is some sort of low grade depression to where you just don't feel like getting up, washing dishes. You don't feel like getting up, taking a bath. You don't feel like, I break those questions down. So that was all I was going to say.
Okay. Nope. And I think you're accurate on that, that as well. The last 25, is there any medications or where a doctor said that you should be taking, but for whatever reason you're not? Again, that could just be something they don't like the side effects, or they couldn't afford the copay. So just being mindful of that. 26 is self-explanatory. Are there any medications like painkillers that you don't take the way the doctor prescribed, or where you sell the medication? So somebody said in the chat about brain issues is judgmental verbiage. I'm mindful of the way I ask all these questions, and rarely do I ever read them as they're written for that reason. And no, we can't answer for them. But again, like Travis said, reminding them, well, you did say this, so are you okay with me marking this because of this reason? So I have that conversation with them. It may take me longer, but it's worth it in the end if I'm really getting them the services that they need and the resources and referrals. And I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. That was like super useful or super helpful. I'm wondering, before I cut it to Charmaine, I'm wondering if maybe we should have like a bigger discussion on the mental health, substance use section of the VI-SPDAT. I noticed that Nina had brought up in the chat that we're not supposed to answer for them. Going back up to what Tracy had said about noticing if they have a mental health disorder. And I'm not super trained on VI-SPDATs. I mean, I look at them every day, but I'm not super trained. So maybe it would be better if we learned like assessment tools, more like motivational interviewing and reflective listening and things of that nature, to not answer for the person, but help them answer in the way that we know will benefit them the best. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And Charmaine, I will
Yes.
give you the floor to do your portion of the training.
Hey,
Okay.
Charmaine, if I can jump in here real quick, I just want you guys to know everything that Travis, the community, and Misty talked about. The scores are put in this document right here in the middle, and that score, the biggest score is 17. The lowest score for housing intervention is 4. We'll talk about that later. Okay, Charmaine, it's back to you.
Okay, hello. I'm sorry if you guys can't hear me. I'm losing my voice. So I'm gonna try to talk as loud as I can. So as far as us, every shelter does their intake process and their VI process. Everything is different at every shelter. But for us, we do our VIs in 5 days, as we were informed to do. We do not do them in intake. Our intakes can take up to 2 hours. It would be impossible for us to also do a VI and keep them focused and get the best VI that we could get from them if we did it in intake. So we do them in 5 days after they have their second case management meeting, because we choose to build a rapport with them in their first, during the intake. Their case manager is whomever does their intake is the person that they also deal with for their whole time at the shelter. We want to build a rapport with them so we can get honest answers from them when they do their VI, if that makes sense. I'm sorry.
Charmaine, this is Deborah from My Brother's Keeper.
Yes.
That does make sense what you said. However, when your shelter, and you did say this too, that each shelter operates a little different when they do that. But with My Brother's Keeper, with us being a emergency shelter, and that is what we are. We provide shelter, overnight stays for emergency situations. And what I've done, like 5-6 years of this VI-SPDAT training and all of the stuff that we're trying to hash out now. So what they taught me was data is data. And if you are going, as soon as you see this person, if you capture as much data as you can on that day, and we do our VI-SPDATs with the intakes, because if we don't see them again, at least we have this data. And then if we see them again, we can update the VI-SPDATs, because we can redo that. And we can redo that in 7 days, 14 days, as you get to know them, and revisit the VI-SPDAT and say, well, you know, I see you going to the doctor, but in your VI-SPDAT, you said you didn't have any health issues. Now there's a contradiction with that. So you can update that VI-SPDAT. You can even update a VI-SPDAT on your observations of a client. So just wanted to throw that out. And we do ours with the intake, and we do them on day 1. We collect as much data on day 1 as we can.
Okay, I mean, again, that's understandable that you guys do it that way, but every shelter we all can't do it that way. I just feel like that what the consensus should be is how we should do it, when it needs to be done, and it being done correctly. Because I know that some shelters only have one person doing intakes. That would be impossible. It would be impossible. And then some days we have 5, 6 intakes in a day. And we just now have 3 people doing intakes.
This is Linda. I just want to chime in. Also, and I think that every shelter is going to have their different processes and procedures. The shelter also does intakes on each child. And so upon intake, depending on the size of the family, we also have to obtain information on each child that's coming in with the parents. So just a reminder that we all have different, kind of niches in emergency shelter. And so processes are definitely going to reflect that.
Absolutely.
Well, I saw you raise your hand up. Did you have a question or did it get answered?
I did. And this conversation came up in our CQI meeting, and I said there, and I'll say it again. I think we don't need a policy dictating when each shelter should uniformly turn in assessments. I think we need to trust that we have the staff that are working in the best interest of the client. And I think it was brought up, someone said, well, if this one does it in 3 days and this one does it in 5 days, if the one in 5 days doesn't get turned in at a certain time, then they may not get their housing at a certain time. And that's not true. The assessment that we just saw Misty do has an acuity score. So if you're at a shelter that will turn you in the next day, or a shelter that will turn you in a week, your acuity score is going to place you on the QB&L where you are. If you score 13 and you got your stuff done a week after someone else's, you're a 13, you're going to be there. I think to try to uniform the shelters is going to really put a burden on the staff, because working as an HMIS administrator, we're doing the best we can to tell the shelter administrators, the HMIS administrators at the agencies, that they don't have to turn in the paper of the VI-SPDAT as long as it's done in the system, which we can access. But we need to understand that when someone goes in a shelter, it is not all just VI-SPDAT and CESA. When they go in the shelter of Flint, there is a bunch of rules these people need to learn. When they go into MBK, they need to learn the house rules. When they go to Carriagetown, they need to learn the house rules. They need to dry wash dry. They need to get their children acclimated. There is a big, huge process that has to be done for everyone who goes into shelter, so that they can, number one, abide by the rules of the shelter and maintain their stay. If they go in there and their main concern is just an assessment, most of the people who go into these shelters and they talk assessments and that's the big rush, they don't stay long. So I really think that we need to really focus on making sure that every client in every shelter get the best care, and trust the staff at every shelter and that they're going to do what's best for the clients, and not make this a uniform process that will handicap the work of Shelter of Flint, of Carriagetown, and of MBK. But we trust them to do what's best. And that's what Linda and Charmaine has done. That's what Deborah has always done. That's what Dallas and Teresa and all the staff at Carriagetown have always done. And that's in my Bill Dow speak, that's my soapbox for now. I just think that we need to trust the agencies and allow them to do what's best for the client that they see.
That is you're preaching to the choir. I'm muting and unmuting by accident. But policy in place gives you something to stand on. So I think that we do need to put a policy in place for this, and maybe give them some room to wiggle, but a policy is definitely needed. A policy for everything we do. It's no more than what HUD or the funders ask for each organization. They want to see your policies and procedures. How do you do this? Why do you do this? And when do you do this? And I don't want to get away from policy for a SPDAT or policy for when we're sending this in. It is necessary, Travis. I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that but a policy is definitely necessary. So let's don't throw that out.
And I value that. I do value that. But in my history, if we are in a rush, we will not do quality work. That's why I say what I say. But thank you, Deborah. I do recognize that.
Awesome. Mo, I saw that you had your hand raised and then you put it down. Do you still have a question or did it get answered?
Yeah, I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, for people, when you do it for TBRAs, when they usually, when you do a SPDAT with them, most of their hardships are over with. So when you ask them questions like, do you have a hard time getting water and stuff like that, all those hardships are over with. So their score is going to be lower, but they're still are considered homeless, but their scores are lower. What do you guys suggest for getting their numbers up, or what can you guys do to put them in the same category as someone as a 13 or something like that, because they're still considered homeless?
Professor Misty, do either of you guys want to jump on that?
My opinion is that I don't, because they're already in a program, I wouldn't think that it needs to be redone because we're gonna go, because they keep their homeless status with rapid rehousing and TBRA. So we're gonna use the paperwork with an updated letter showing that they're in the program and the expected exit date to add them to the HCV list, because HCV does not require CESAs and SPDATs. We do use them, especially the CESA, because the information that's on it, and the SPDAT, of course, the score, but that could just be on the CESA at the top too. But we're not going by that because they're in TBRA. They should be referred to us at a certain point, which Tracy and I have recently discussed in her team in one of our meetings, and I don't know which one because I'm in several. But at what point should they be referred to HCV? And I actually had sent her an email this morning regarding those same things.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You have a question or comment, Bill?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I had to make sure I was off mute there. A couple of questions come to mind about the recidivism rate of clients coming back to the shelter after they've been in the system and then back in again. And also something that had a chance to talk about was the 90-day rule of clients staying in the shelters. I don't know. I think that's a mission policy, but I don't think it's set in stone. I think we really need to look at it. I'm not telling shelters by any stretch of the imagination what to do or how to do your business, but I think it's very clear our outcome should be moving people from homelessness to housing and how we're doing that. That takes navigation, that takes engagement. Case management, I'm also going to recommend too. What we're doing here is talking about housing and getting people housed, and hopefully they're staying housed. And we also need to refer them to the mental health system for substance use treatment and other kinds of things. The SPDAT is just the beginning of where we need to start with navigating and working with these clients from where they are now to where they want to be. And that's hopefully safely housed somewhere. But I think we really need to look at what our recidivism rate is in the community and in the continuum at large. That'll tell us give us a whole lot of information of where we need to go with what we're doing. And thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for that. Deborah, do you have something else?
Yes, I do. I totally agree with Bill. That's my biggest hiccup over here is recidivism. And I at my state meetings and VA meetings, I talk about being a single male here, and that causes our recidivism to go up. But I do want to let Bill know that according to the state and the VA now, they do not have a 90-day stay. There is no length of time that a person can stay in the shelter. You do not get paid by bed nights anymore. You do not. So the 90 days went away last year.
Amen on that one. There was an interesting discussion about that, about how the state previously reimbursed for how many people you had staying in a bed. And if the bed wasn't occupied, you didn't get paid for it, which is ridiculous. Our goal is
Absolutely.
just to help people get moved into a different and more stable situation. Thank you, Deborah, for confirming that.
Nina, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so just to respond to Bill, I think we kind of covered it yesterday, is that it is our mission as the shelter to recidivize folks into permanent stable housing. But it's really hard to do when none is available because of the eviction moratoriums. I'm not saying that everybody should be evicted so we can house our homeless people, but when there's a lack of housing because nobody is being reprimanded for their poor decisions while they're in permanent stable housing, I think that's what's really stifling the situation and keeping people from obtaining that permanent housing, because there simply is none available.
I can definitely echo what you just said. However, the eviction protection has expired, but we still have landlords that are working with us because of the SARA program between us and G-Card. But housing is definitely an issue, huge issue, which we've all recognized, I think, in all of our meetings. But you're right.
Oh, totally. We talked about that at quite extensively yesterday. These conversations are great. I think they all intertwine with each other. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I have one comment. I've been doing some trying to house this lady and her children that needed kind of more than what I'm seeing in the community that's available. I found out a wealth of information yesterday, and I'm just curious about some of these outlier apartments that have that built their apartments saying that they're going to have certain amount of units for low income. Are we tapped into those? Because I received information on a few of them. They don't advertise that because they don't want vouchers, but they did build their buildings on the premise that these amount of units are for low income. How do we tap into those resources? Anyone? Bill, dying to answer.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. So anyone, if they know the answer or know how to go about getting the answer, you please speak out.
Deborah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
very
know
good
one of the CEIS team members, they had gone to this website, and I now have them try to give us something. This website lists all of those properties. And when people call on the line for low income, they would give them. So let me tap into the CEIS team and see what list this is and what the website is. So stay tuned for that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Tracy. Because yeah, that is a very good question. Bill?
Possibility here, maybe we need to talk to Bishop about how tax credits are being used in Genesee County. Now, this is very important here because we know Communities First does a very good job of accessing tax credits. And then they have certain units that are set aside for supportive housing and for persons and families coming off the off the by name list. That's how you're supposed to use tax credits. But it also brings up a good question that if a project is saying, hey, that they're tax credit funded but are not making units available, that's not cool. And that is something I think legal services should be advised of immediately. There's a lot of questions about that one. We got fair, this is Fair Housing Month. This is a good example of it right here. That's all I can say about it. This is a critical issue. Plus, quite frankly, I think given where we are now with the so-called end of the pandemic, quote unquote, that we are going to be seeing a lot more evictions and a lot more changes. Maybe we need to look at more supportive housing in this year's upcoming NOFA. That's just a thought that I'm saying here. I am thinking out loud, folks. So please forgive me if I went a little too far as usual.
No, your comments are, I think, they're on my mind, so I'm sure they're on other people's minds. So yes. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
Yes, I do. I want to thank the Charmaine and Deborah for bringing their perspective of what sort of occurs and the dynamics of the specificities of their shelter, which leads us to there's not going to be a cookie cutter way, but we may be able to develop something that encompasses the minimum all the way to the maximum. But I just wanted to say, we wanted to create room so that the people that do the work can tell us what is required. So many times it's us talking, we're not doing the work. So I want to thank them for stepping up to the plate and sharing with what they're seeing and what they're doing, and really guiding us on what that policy should look like. So thank you both. I appreciate it. Okay, back to you, Erica.
Yes, definitely. Always appreciate people that are out actually in the field doing the work. It's one thing to look at something and say, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. But if you're not actually in the field doing the work, then, you know, really it should be a conversation to be had with the people that are actually doing the work. If there are no more conversations or no more comments, we are having another conversation on Monday at 11:30. We're going to be talking about service gaps and standard operating procedures. That's going to be facilitated by Deborah and facilitated by Tracy. So please stay tuned for that. These conversations have all been very good. This is a good start to something. I like that we're doing this. Everybody have
Erica,
a wonderful.
can I jump in one more time?
Of course.
Thank you. These are being taped. We are going to videotaped, I should say. We are going to post them on the CoC website. We are also going to have notes, and then takeaways from the meetings, and to-dos out of that meeting. So for example, out of this meeting, we're going to get motivational training. We're going to make sure that our next VI-SPDAT training includes role play, and we will put those things when we post them up on our CoC website, just so you'll know that you'll be able to access this even after today.
Awesome, thank you. All righty, everybody have a great day. We'll see you for the next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate your hard work every day. Have
Hold
a good
on,
one.
folks. Thank you for your comments.
Have a good day.
Wow, valuable.
Have a blessed day.
All right, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. You're amazing.
I know good at kneecap with a brain, or even just